Cleveland Browns are finally coming back home after a couple of road trips to Indianapolis and to Seattle. Those obviously went two different ways. Both games a little frustrating at moments. Browns obviously won in Indianapolis and came up a little bit short against the Seahawks. They've got the Arizona Cardinals coming to town on Sunday. And to learn more about the Cardinals, we're going to go behind enemy lines with Donnie Druin next with Browns Digest. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our coverage on Browns Digest. I'm Brendan Gulick, and Donnie Druin, our guest here this morning, our partner on the FanNation Network, covering the Arizona Cardinals, who is also fresh off of being a fan last night at the final Major League Baseball game of the year. Went to Game 5 of the World Series. I assume you're a Diamondbacks fan, so maybe I should just start by apologizing. I know your pain as a Cleveland Indians Guardians fan. 2016 was not a lot of fun, so I feel your pain, man.
Yeah, I was definitely rooting for the D-backs last night. Is this a good time to let everybody know I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, so I'm a diehard Pirates fan?
Wow,
Maybe
great
even
time.
Closet
Yeah, the tone of this
Steelers
is going to
and
change.
Penguins.
Tone of this is going to change a little bit.
Had to.
Love it. Love it. Hey, let's get into a fun matchup here, right? This is going to be an interesting game for, I think, a lot of different reasons. I know the records don't necessarily lead you to believe that this could be a great game, but that's why the NFL is so much fun, because you never know what you're going to get. And I think there's some compelling storylines coming in. Since you're the guest, I'll put you under the magnifying glass first. So, you know, the biggest thing that Browns fans want to know coming in is, will Kyler Murray play this weekend? Because that feels like it changes things. Just your gut feeling. Do you think Kyler's going to go on Sunday?
I don't think he's going to go. No, I think the Cardinals have been very, very adamant on them being extremely cautious with his return. It seems like the plan has always been to exercise the full amount of his 21-day practice window before they have to activate him. And I mean, let's not kid ourselves. They're a 1-7 football team. I don't exactly think Kyler Murray's presence is going to immediately turn the ship around and make them a playoff contender. And they have such a large decision coming into 2024 offseason, or whether or not they should keep him, trade him, whatever. Obviously, they're going to need a handful of games in order to determine whether or not they like him as their franchise guy, but I don't feel like they need to rush him back, and I think that's kind of the overall feeling around the facility as well. Will he be healthy? Probably. I mean, he practiced fully last week with no issues at all. It's probably going to be the same again this week as well. I mean, on the first injury report that we saw, which, by the way, 20 people on the injury report for Cleveland. Oh my goodness.
Tough scene.
Yeah, tough, absolutely. But it looks like Clayton Tune, the 5th-round rookie, is going to get the start in Arizona.
Wow. So I'm trying to digest that. If Kyler's healthy, why isn't he playing?
I think they just want to make sure mentally he's good to go in terms of understanding the offense. And I think they want as many reps as possible on the practice field before they have to roll him out. Tuesday, November 8th is the final day that they can have him on the PUP list before they activate him to the active roster. So I think they're trying to squeeze as many reps as possible with the first and maybe even the second team, because he's been throwing to practice squad members for a majority of practices, according to a couple different people. He has had a couple reps with the ones in practice, but not enough to comfortably throw him out there. Maybe that changes this week. He very well could start, but the general feeling around the facility is that Clayton Tune is going to be the guy, and Kyler is only going to be there if absolutely necessary.
So, assuming that Kyler doesn't play, it's been a little bit of a weird week, right? Because at first, Jonathan Gannon comes out and says, hey, Josh Dobbs is their starting quarterback this week. And then not very long after, he changes his tune quickly. I'm sure you've heard that joke all week. And, you know, I think there were a bunch of people wondering, well, gee, what's that all about? It didn't take long to, you know, start adding the numbers together and recognize the trade deadline was here, and Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles. And so Josh Dobbs is on his way from the desert to Minneapolis. I feel like the pivot from Dobbs to Tune with what's going on with Kyler probably doesn't give Cardinals fans a lot of confidence. Am I reading that situation right?
There's been the large contingent of the fan base that have wanted to see Clayton Tune since week
Hmm.
one. Fifth round rookie. He made a lot of noise in OTAs and during rookie mini camp. And then you get to training camp and he's making a lot of noise too. And it's just kind of put us back in a time machine. Kyler Murray, I'm still so far away from possibly playing. Colt McCoy still in the desert. And when you watch Colt McCoy throw football compared to Clayton Tune throw football, then you kind of talk yourself into maybe Clayton Tune starting. Cardinals did not like either option. Then obviously that's when they, pulled the trigger for a trade for Josh Dobbs. I think Clayton Tune, very, very raw. I think he's pretty gifted athletically, but whenever it comes to an NFL quarterback making NFL type throws, especially outside of numbers, his accuracy just was not there. He didn't really have the arm strength to push it towards the sideline when he needed it. My biggest gripe with him during the preseason play was he was not able to progress through reads. So if his first option wasn't there, the play's kind of shot. Right. But I mean, it's a fifth round rookie for a reason. No offense to him, but to throw him out there on the road with potential bad weather against, let's not kid ourselves here, probably like a top three defense at worst right now with Miles Garrett and company. That's a very, very tall order. But at the same time, I think Dobbs' time in Arizona ran its course, and they just want to see what they have out of the rookie before Kyler comes back. So I think that move was more so a vote in confidence of Kyler being ready for maybe next week's game against the Atlanta Falcons, more so than an indication on Dobbs' return.
So obviously, it's been a frustrating year. One win so far, albeit against a good Dallas Cowboys team, and a couple of games that you certainly looked like the Cardinals were in, and ultimately it just didn't work. Last week, among those, a one-score loss to Baltimore, and there were moments in the game where, especially in the first half, the Ravens weren't exactly running away with it. When you've seen the Cardinals play at their best, what does that look like so far this year?
Yeah, when they're playing their best, they're running the football, and I think James Conner's absence on the injured reserve list has been such a overlooked thing, at least from like a national perspective. Whenever James Conner was healthy, I mean, they were able to run the ball effectively, which definitely helped open up the pass game, especially with play action. And their defense was just swarming to the football and really limiting guys. I mean, Lamar Jackson had 2 rushing yards at halftime of last week. I mean, they did a great job, keeping him contained for as long as they could. But eventually, so the lack of talent on both sides of the ball really comes back to haunt them. And I think whenever you look at the early season Cardinals, you can make an argument that if Kyler Murray is healthy and playing in place Josh Dobbs, they're probably a 2-2, a 3-3 football team. Now, obviously, hypotheticals don't really fly in the NFL, but it's kind of the reality of it, right? So a really balanced rushing attack. Maybe you throw Kyler Murray in there, and the offense is clicking probably a little bit more than Dobbs. But I mean, you have Jonathan Gannon there, former Eagles defensive coordinator. You have Nick Rallis running the show. He was his linebackers coach in Philadelphia. So there's hope with time and with more added talent. There can really be a solid football team here in the desert.
Excited for Jonathan Gannon to get a chance to come home and coach a game in Cleveland this weekend. I'm sure he's obviously a Cleveland native. He played his high school football. He was a 3-sport standout at St. Ignatius High School, which is 30 blocks from the from the stadium downtown. So it'll be cool for him to have a chance to coach a game there. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of family and friends there supporting him, which should be kind of fun. But he's got a tall order in front of him because this Browns defense, as you mentioned, is playing generally among the best defense in the NFL, even if the last 2 weeks haven't been quite as impressive as they were early on. When you look at the Cardinals offensively and what they are bringing with them this weekend, how do you think they're going to try to attack Cleveland's defense?
I mean, they would be remiss if offensive coordinator Drew Petzing wasn't at least going to try to establish the rushing attack. Now with backup Brennan back and Barry DeMercado, that's going to be a little tough. It would have been a little tough for James Conner, a Pro Bowler, to really do that. Basically everything I kind of just touched on. Try to establish the rushing attack first. At least keep Cleveland's defense honest through the first half. Try to utilize play action a lot. With Josh Dobbs, they had a handful of like designed quarterback runs. Clayton Tune can move. I don't think probably as well as Josh Dobbs. I'm curious to see how that kind of impacts things. I will say that Clayton Tune was definitely more adept at throwing the ball downfield and kind of pushing the limits of the defense, maybe trying to take the top off. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a couple shots here and there, which is something that Cardinals fans really haven't seen the first 7 weeks of the season. But I mean, short and sweet and simple for Clayton Tune. You don't want to ask the rookie quarterback to do too much, especially on the road and then that hostile environment that is the dog pound. And as a Pittsburgh native, I can't believe that those words just came out of my mouth. But I mean, what a different world we were living in. The Browns have a dominant defense, and I do think they're going to take advantage of the Houston product in Clayton Tune.
All right, last one. Arizona's given up 100 yards to an individual rusher 3 games in a row. The Browns have had an interesting year running the football because the first couple games, from a team perspective, were awesome. You lose Nick Chubb. The next 2 games were really pretty poor. That room's been a little banged up for Cleveland this year. Jerome Ford is back and he's healthy, but he had an ankle injury. Kareem Hunt hasn't been 100%, although he's probably closer to that now. The Browns have cycled through a couple of different guys on the practice squad to make sure they have enough depth at running back. And yet the last couple of weeks, Cleveland has found a way to run the ball generally pretty effectively, even though for the most part, everybody in Cleveland wanted to crucify Kevin Stefanski for throwing on 3rd and 3 instead of running the ball in the way the Browns ended up losing to Seattle last weekend. So I bring that up because Cleveland has shown that they can effectively run the ball. They've got good offensive line play. Where can Arizona be better in stopping the run? Because they've been pretty susceptible to that, especially the last few weeks.
Yeah, I would say gap integrity. The first couple of weeks, I mean, the defensive end, LJ Collier, who's still on injured reserve, he did play week 1, and then they had a couple of other key pieces missing. I mean, when you talk about gap integrity, especially against a Browns football team that can run the ball so well, regardless if it's Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt or even Nick Chubb before he got hurt, you really need to stay true to your assignments, especially in a front 7 that honestly does not have – outside of Kaiser White, there are no playmakers, right? At least in terms of attacking the football from a rushing perspective. Middle linebacker Kaiser White definitely anchors the team, and I'm pretty sure he's going to hit 100 tackles this year. He's definitely on pace for that. Solid leadership guy, but outside of him, but it feels like it's me and you playing in the front 7 effectively, which is not always a great thing. I think you and I are both very talented, but maybe tackling an NFL running back isn't exactly on the repertoire. So it's going to be tough. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of zone being used in the rushing attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the zone rushing team like that. I mean, we've seen Jerome Ford pop off whenever he gets a full load, and we obviously all know what Kareem Hunt can do. It's going to be a tough task, and if they at least stay in the rushing lanes, maybe take up a couple blockers and allow the linebackers to get through from the second level. Maybe we're talking, but I mean, like you said, the Cardinals have allowed such good rushing performances the last couple of weeks, and on top of that too, they've really failed to take away the other team's number 1 weapon, whether that be rushing or receiving. So it feels like somebody in Cleveland is due for a big day. It's almost as if they're kind of just drawing names out of a hat to do so.
All right, fair enough. Let's reverse the table here. What do you want to know about the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, I think I have to start this conversation with Deshaun Watson, right? I mean, the shoulder injury, the team's kind of being, I don't want to say weird, but oddly quiet about it. I feel like what's going on, at least from the desert. How do you feel like he's doing? How do you feel like he's played thus far? And I mean, obviously, there's such a big dynamic with his contract moving forward. I mean, is there any chance the Browns might try to move off of him in the future? Maybe not distant, but maybe sometime down the road.
Yeah, I mean, so Deshaun Watson is the talking point right now in town. A lot of frustration around his lack of availability. I guess I'm not sure how much you guys have heard. He was medically cleared to play, but was deemed functionally not able to play a few weeks ago. And that rubbed some people the wrong way because there started to become questions of, well, does he want to be here? Is he tough enough? Whatever. And then those quickly were put aside because he's played through some ridiculous injuries before. It's like, well, stop questioning the guy's toughness. Brady Quinn says what he says about he made his $230 million. What's he actually want to get on the field for? It's been this cycle of drama. Deshaun was back at practice in a limited capacity yesterday. I anticipate that he'll be at practice again today. There are a lot of varying opinions on whether or not he has zip on his pass in practice. I think Deshaun, if you're asking me to take a guess, I don't think he plays this weekend. I think he's close. But I keep saying I think because nobody knows. And I actually don't really think the team even knows. It's a rotator cuff injury. We're 5 weeks into this. He played really well against the Titans and gave Cleveland fans a glimpse of hey, this is what we got, right? This is the quarterback we brought here that we've mortgaged our entire future for, to try to win a Super Bowl. And it's been really frustrating. That is basically the only part in this growing sample size now where Deshaun's looked really good. So, the health thing has been a major problem. I am certainly hopeful he's going to be back out there soon. I can tell you when I see him in the locker room a couple days a week that he looks and feels and sounds like you would expect somebody that is right on the edge of being ready to go. I'm sure there's that element of I want to play, but I just don't quite have it yet. He has said publicly several times he doesn't want to handicap the team so that if he's not 100%, he won't play. I really admire PJ Walker's toughness and his competitiveness, but he hasn't been good enough. And Cleveland needs Deshaun Watson not only to play, but to play like he's capable of playing, because there's a lot of talent on this roster. There are high goals for this season. And if Deshaun can't perform at the level that he's capable of, it's been pretty hard to reach those.
Yeah, I could tell you from first-hand experience. Cardinals fans definitely have no idea what it's like to have a quarterback with drama around them. So I definitely think everybody listening will really kind of take you to that. I do want to keep the conversation on the offensive side of the ball. You already highlighted Nick Chubb's injury. How different do you feel like the offense has been pre and post Nick Chubb? Because at least for my money, he's one of the best pure runners in the NFL. So losing a key piece like that, I mean, Cardinals fans out here have seen the offense without James Conner, and I can't even imagine what the Browns offense has been like without a guy like Chubb in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, but schematically, it hasn't really changed much. Kareem Hunt was a free agent and luckily was still available when Chubb went down, and then they brought him to Cleveland and have sort of worked him back into things. Cleveland's got a pretty good offensive line, which is, certainly one of the strengths of this team, especially on the interior. Wyatt Teller, Ethan Posick, and Joel Bitonio have played really, really well this year. Cleveland's gotten pretty good play from its tackles, but that has been a bit of a rotating thing, especially at right tackle. Jack Conklin gets hurt basically right away at the beginning of the season. And now DeJuan Jones may be out more than 1 week with a right shoulder injury. Jedrick Wills has had some pretty bad moments this year at left tackle, but he's playing better lately. And I think if you're looking at it on the whole, certainly progressing. So that's solid. And so because you've got an offensive line you've largely been able to lean on, the Browns have been able to run the football fairly well. David Njoku's been really good as a tight end, certainly in the receiving game, but I think he's blocked well this year too. I am a little concerned about Cleveland's ability to run the ball this weekend, though, if James Hudson is the starting right tackle, if DeJuan Jones can't play. I mean, we're still a few days away from a game, but I think that's a fair concern. Kevin Stefanski, I think maybe had his best play calling uh, game as a Cleveland Browns head coach last Sunday. And it's a little unfortunate that the only thing everybody remembers and wants to talk about is the decision to throw on 3rd and 3, which ultimately ended up in a bizarre interception, and Seattle went and scored and won the game. But if you watch the game from start to finish, I thought his play calling was brilliant the first 55 minutes of the game, and I actually didn't even hate the throw on that 3rd down, but I digress. A lot of screen passes, a lot of counters, just getting the eyes of the defenders in the wrong spots, and trying to build an offense around what PJ Walker can do. I thought it was masterful. Kevin Stefanski called a great game against Seattle. And I think he's done a pretty good job of mixing in the right kinds of runs. So, full circle here, your answer to your question, does it look different without Nick Chubb? Hell yeah, it does. But it also looks like the same offense. You're just missing one of the best players in football. And it stinks because when he was out there, you feel like you could have probably leaned on him during a stretch here where Watson was unavailable, but can't do anything about it.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And I think, obviously Drew Petzing being a Cleveland guy, learning under Stefanski for a handful of years, you do see a little bit of Stefanski's kind of fingerprints around Petzing offense here in Arizona. I do want to flip to the defensive side of the ball, though. Obviously, Myles Garrett, game wrecker, one of the best players in football, period, regardless of whatever side of the ball you're talking about. Highlight somebody that Cardinals fans should probably be on the lookout for that might not be on the same level as Myles Garrett, just in terms of marketability, household name, whatever it might be. Who's one guy that kind of pops in your head and said, okay, this guy, he's not selling jerseys, but he's going to make a difference on Sunday?
I mean, there's a couple, and I would argue they should be selling jerseys. Dalvin Tomlinson has maybe been the most impactful guy they brought onto the defense this year that wasn't here last year at defensive tackle. 94 is fun to watch, man, and he is a Cleveland Brown through and through. He is a dude inside. He's fun. He plays with joy, but he plays with this violence that's just awesome. He can hand fight with the best of defensive tackles. He is terrific at stopping the run. He makes a lot of tackles for being a defensive tackle. So, doesn't play a position that's going to get a $100 million contract, but that guy's been awesome. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the former Notre Dame linebacker, has, I think, really flashed here the last few weeks. Had a couple of tough moments last weekend, but largely he's been really good. Anthony Walker's been terrific as a linebacker. I've enjoyed what I've seen from him. Speaking of a guy that has cashed in on a big contract, Denzel Ward's had a good year. Grant Delpit, everybody wanted to run him out of town with how bad he had played last year. Delpit's been rock solid this year. Juan Thornhill's played really, really well. The defense is missing Greg Newsome most likely this weekend, and maybe for more than that after he got hurt last week. That really stinks. So, I mean, there's a lot of different directions I could go in answering that question, but 94 is fun to watch. I like Dalvin Tomlinson.
Yeah, just between you and me, nobody else listening, I really wanted the Steelers to grab Owusu-Koramoah in the draft a couple of years ago. So I'm definitely sure Browns fans are elated that he's playing so well for the Cleveland Browns. I do want to ask you, though, it's such a tough matchup week to week. I think Jonathan Gannon said it best. It's truly a week to week league, right? I mean, obviously you have the good teams, the great teams, the bad teams. If you don't show up on Sunday, you are going to get beat, right? In your mind, what has to go wrong in Cleveland in order for the Cardinals to walk out with their second win of the season?
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, I am not chalking this up as like, hey, boop, Browns win. I think Cleveland's a better team. I think they should win, but we have seen plenty of things already in the Browns season that have gone right, that coulda, woulda, shoulda gone wrong, and vice versa for sure. You could absolutely argue the Browns should be 6-1, and you could certainly convince me that they could be 2-5. So being 4-3 sounds about right, right? Yeah, I almost don't even know how to answer it because there have been some moments this year where Cleveland has been terrible in the turnover battle. They didn't even win the turnover battle until the Indianapolis game. And even at that, they won the game by 1 point. They got pretty lucky on the, at the end of the game there. Last week, they created a couple of turnovers, but they turned it over in some critical moments that turned into points for the Seahawks. So, look, if PJ Walker's starting at quarterback, and again, I'm not trying to diss the guy because I genuinely like him. He's been really personable with us in the locker room. I appreciate how hard he plays. You can see his want to when he's out there. He's thrown 1 touchdown and 5 picks. And that's obviously a problem. His accuracy has been a little spotty, and he has shown some gutsiness in some big moments for sure. But there's a reason why he was on the practice squad and not on the 53 until Deshaun got hurt. So I think there's a bunch of ways where things could go sideways. And unfortunately, it could start with, if PJ goes out and throws an interception or two. Theoretically, when you look at the Browns on paper, you think wow, that defense is legit. We got to come in and we got to play rock solid football if we're going to beat a team that defends like that. But the reality is the last couple of weeks, the Colts and Seahawks have put some things on tape and have shown an ability to move the ball. So, I think the rest of the league is exhaling a little bit because the Browns are good, but they're human. And unfortunately, they've gotten in their own way a few times. So I'm sure there are plenty of ways that Arizona could come in here and create a little magic.
For sure. And my final question for you, there's obviously a rebuild going on in Arizona, the first year of it, new staff, new front office. I think according to overthecap.com, they're projected to have $66 million in cap space. They have 6 picks in the first 3 rounds in 2024. Ugly process to begin. Yeah, ugly process to begin. But I think Monty Ossenfort, the general manager here, is doing a really, really strong job of, tearing things down, from ground zero and building it back up the right way. I'm curious from an outsider's perspective, how do you guys look at the Arizona Cardinals, both in the present tense and then moving forward in the future?
I don't think Arizona's very good.
That's fair. They are undefeated on the moral scoreboard, but I mean, they're 1-7 football team. So
yeah, I don't think they're terrible, but I don't think they're very good. Good teams find ways to win games when they're not at their best for whatever reason. And I've seen too many instances just on the surface level and paying attention to the Cardinals the first couple months. I feel like I'm seeing instances where they're not playing well and it hasn't mattered because they still haven't figured out a way to win games. Whereas, and I know what that formula looks like because we've seen it a lot over the years here. Whereas now it feels like even when the Browns haven't played their best football, they've grinded out some wins, right? The way they beat San Francisco, the way they beat Indianapolis, they've had a few moments this year that have been, wow, okay, good job figuring it out because it didn't look perfect for 60 minutes for sure. So yeah, I mean, I certainly sympathize with where Arizona's at. To me, it's as simple as it comes down to quarterback play. I think Josh Dobbs was a good stopgap, and I don't blame the Cardinals for flipping him because obviously if you want to build something, you need draft capital. And you got to hope that when you're acquiring those assets, that you're getting them in a year where there's going to be a lot of really talented, good dudes. I don't know if it's full on tank for Marvin Harrison kind of bad. Marvin Harrison Jr. at Ohio State's unbelievable. Might the Chicago Bears be in a spot where they draft him instead of the Cardinals? I don't know. I think Arizona needs to figure out if Kyler's their guy, and they need to figure that out this year, in my opinion. I would be willing, if I'm an Arizona fan, I'd be willing to let it ride with him a little bit, but I need to see a little bit more. And obviously it stinks that he's not on the field. So, Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. The idea of Clayton Tune being the quarterback this weekend coming to Cleveland again, like it's the NFL, man, and anything can happen. Fully recognize that. But my perception of Arizona is not incredibly high. But I recognize they beat Dallas and they played a good game against a good game against Baltimore this past weekend. Obviously, they had close losses the first couple weeks of the season with Washington and the Giants. You know, they've been in it. They just haven't found a way to get it done. So that's probably the best way I can sum it up.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It feels like they're there until they're not, and it's still so early in the reign of Jonathan Gannon, and I'm sure they'll get things figured out. But I mean, this year's definitely the year. 2024 is going to be a big offseason when it comes to Kyler Murray and everything else. So I really appreciate you taking time to answer my questions.
Yeah, for sure. Glad to have you. Where can our Browns fans find your Cardinals work as they get ready for the weekend?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter or X, whatever the cool kids call it, at Donnie Druin. And then obviously I work at allcardinals.com or SLA.com/NFL/Cardinals.
All right. Donnie Druin from All Cardinals, part of the FanNation Network in the Sports Illustrated Media Group, our guest here today. Looking forward to the Cardinals and the Browns on Sunday afternoon. In the meantime, we'll have all the latest from the facility here in just, frankly, 2 hours. It'll be an open locker room. We will hear from all three coordinators today. Bubba Ventrone, Alex Van Pelt, and Jim Schwartz will all talk to the media. We'll have a chance to watch the first 25 minutes of practice or so as well. So keep it locked to BrownsDigest.com for all the latest there. I'm Brendan Gulick for Donnie Druin. Thanks for tuning in. Looking forward to more coverage of the Cleveland Browns coming up later today.